Tony, the world, of course, is watching the Discovery 5 up there aboard the shuttle, the orbiter. But what about the other 5? What about the other people so important to NASA, to Discovery, and to the 5 men on board? What about the wives? Yesterday, in a very rare interview, correspondent Jeff Levine sat down and talked with 2 of the wives. Let's listen in.
I think the logical place to begin is what I'm thinking of. This is not a low-pressure enterprise. Obviously, the emotions are cooking. How do you cope?
You cope minute to minute. Just kind of handle each morning and then the afternoon, and don't look too far ahead, and just kind of move along. If you look too far ahead or spend too much time thinking about it, you tend to get rather anxious, and it's a little bit easier just to keep lots of friends and family and activity around you, and time passes pretty quickly that way.
Is this, in a sense, like being a policeman's wife or a fireman's wife? This is a factor in the equation of your marriage. You have to live with it.
I've often compared it to that. We're no different than a lot of other spouses whose husbands have a high-risk job. They accept it, and you live with it, and that's the way
it's them. It's just
it's a part of them, and you accept that.
I suppose, though, that what happened to Challenger has to color your thinking about this mission to some degree. You're only human. You can't expunge it from your consciousness totally. Does it drift in and out, this nightmare?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt. It would be foolish of us not to look at that every now and then and examine it and examine the feelings that you have about it. That was a terrible loss to the nation, but to each of us personally, because they were close friends. I mean, aside from the fact that they were astronauts and whatever they were doing, it was like losing a close friend, but losing several at the same time, and that was very, very devastating for all of us. It's like anything else. When you are faced with the stark reality of it and you have to face it, then you do. It's easy to kind of, I think for Covey's last flight, I really didn't allow myself any time to think about those sort of possibilities. That just wasn't something that could happen.
Is that the way you deal with it?
I did last time. I really didn't worry about that. I was not so very different from most of the nation, and that was just not something. It's like I don't worry about getting in my car in the morning and that I'm going to have an accident. I just don't worry about that. I assume that can't happen to me, and I assume the same thing with Covey's shuttle flight and with every shuttle flight that came along. That the Challenger accident stopped the privilege of being able to be quite so naive about it. And yeah, you do have to grow up a little bit and say, okay, now let's face the facts. These things can happen, and if they do, there's not a lot of control that I have over it, and there's not a lot of reason for me to worry and fret and stew, because it's not going to change the course of events. They're going to unfold the way they'll unfold.
After the Challenger, Mike and I talked quite a lot, but one of the things that he said that really surprised me was, you know, of the 2 jobs, you have the tougher job. And it surprised me because I had never heard it verbalized. But the fun part, the execution of it, I mean, he's busy. He doesn't have to worry about all the various and sundry things at home and the bearing up of all the people, all of the family. We are the people who are left here with the family, with the children, and we're the people who have to carry on. And very much so, that's true.
In terms of explaining things to children, is there a simple or relatively easy way of doing that, or do answers lead to more questions?
There's never a simple way to explain to a child.
I think every child handles it differently. I think after the Challenger accident, watching the way my children handled it versus the way other children handled it, it was an interesting, I mean, I thought that we would be able to sit down and discuss this in kind of the same fashion, and with my children, it was not their fear or their amazement in it all had very little to do with the fact that these were astronauts that had been killed. They were amazed that a dad could die. That wasn't the normal event of things. They didn't really do much connection between the fact that those parents were doing for a living the same thing that Covey did for a living. That was not part of the equation at all. It was more of dealing with the fact that we all are mortal, and at some point it may end, and we don't have any control over that date or time.
To what extent is it possible to keep NASA out of family affairs? Can you have a family life amidst the hoopla and the work? workload's got to be fantastic.
We are absolutely normal people. We have absolutely normal family lives. And until I...
Speak for yourself.
when I left Houston the first of this week...
Was he an engineer, too?
Well, fairly much so. I mean, we're just like any other two-person working couple, and Kathy and Covey are the same way. We juggle household and children and make things work, but we're fairly normal.
I'm still waiting for normal to come back. It was somewhere when I was 20, and I'm expecting it again at 60. I don't know.
We have
I gave it up in between.
We all have our moments when it becomes. I mean, you do a juggling act. Any professional couple or any couple where both of you work do a juggling act. And Mike and I have always compared it to juggling until you drop a ball, and then everything stops. You pick it all up and you put it all back together again, but you make it work through effort and through teamwork.
So it's a special life, is it not, Kitty?
It is, and part of it is knowing that that you're helping make history and you're helping mold the direction that the space program will go. That's part of their job.
Is that the special aspect of Discovery? This is an historic mission. No one can quarrel with that. This is your place.
Oh yes, this is the place to be right now in space history. We are going to make it work.
No, I think that I know when Covey came home or called me to tell me that he'd been selected for this flight, it was, you know, he was probably standing on his desk, jumping up and down. He was absolutely ecstatic about the opportunity that was being afforded him. And I remember asking him at the time, "Are you a little nervous about this?" Well, that was not even part of the equation at all. I mean, this was, you know, I'm having an opportunity to start things back on right track, get things going again, and I wouldn't miss it for the world.
And we're certainly glad that Kathy, Covey, and Kitty, Mike Lounge's wife, took time out yesterday on the eve of this historic launch to sit down and talk with CNN. Interesting listening to them. Indeed, strength up there in the heavens and strength down here represented in these women as they carry on. Incidentally, in the early 1970s, Mike Lounge flew combat missions over Southeast Asia. He was flying a big F-14 Phantom jet off the flight deck of the Carrier Enterprise, but Lounge is now aboard a much different flying machine on a more peaceful mission.
John Mike Lounge, former Navy pilot, assigned as mission specialist on Discovery. 42 years old, married, 2 children, astronaut since 1981, with 170 hours in space. Mike Lounge, a graduate of the Naval Academy, is a Vietnam War veteran with 99 combat missions as a Navy pilot. He has degrees in physics, mathematics, and astrogeophysics. The upcoming mission will not be Mike Lounge's first aboard Discovery. He flew on the orbiter's most recent voyage in August and September of 1985. Earlier this year, Lounge was asked by CNN's John Zarella about safety precautions for the upcoming flight.
It'll be as safe as we can make it, reasonably. What's the saying about ships? They're safe in the harbor, but that's not what they're for. So, yeah, it's as safe as we can reasonably make it, and the agency management from Admiral Truly on down has said we won't fly until we're sure we're ready to fly. And we've taken all reasonable precautions fixing the known problems. We'll do that and get on with it. If you ride it once, you know it's not routine.
Asked what it's like to sit in a spacecraft and wait for blastoff, Lounge said, "You really get launchitis once you get strapped in. You really want to do it." Mike Lounge, mission specialist on the Discovery flight, is from Burlington, Colorado.
Well, they really wanted to do it. They are doing it at this hour, at this second. When that beautiful orbiter lifted off, my colleague here, Bonnie Dunbar, was jumping up and down in the chair and watching, and I had a pair of binoculars, and I almost fell off the back of this riser body, following it up until a cloud came overhead, and we had to stop and go to the cameras. But there was another reaction. NASA workers and also news media representatives, people from around the world, some 4,000 of them, they had their own reaction. Let's see what it was like.
Discovery's 3 main engines on full power. A beautiful liftoff.
Discovery streaking into space aboard a column of flame.
It's great to be back in space again.
everybody in America felt this was important. The country cares, I think, a lot.
And to see this thing to go flawlessly, man, it is just super.
This was the best one. And I remember several times when Scobie would say in training, when things were like lagging a little bit, and Scobie would say, time to press on, time to press on.
They're pressing on in space.